Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. So my name is Anoushka, and I'm your host for this D2 Consulting Group event. So today I'm joined by David Cooney, who is a director at McKinsey Company. David studied a BA in Natural Sciences at Trinity, specialising in biochemistry and structural biology before studying drug discovery and development at Imperial College London. Upon graduating from Imperial College, David joined Branding Science, working as both a research consultant and an executive. He then joined Blue Latitude, where he worked for 4 years across UK and US offices, and his time with Blue Latitude culminated in his appointment as managing consultant and head of precision medicine. He is now a director at McKinsey Company, and as a Trinity alumnus with a background in science and research, he's a great example of all the possibilities of becoming a consultant through science. So thank you very much for joining us. Firstly, I'd like to talk about your time at Trinity. So of course, Ireland has an international reputation when it comes to sciences. So given the variety of colleges, I'm just wondering what made you curious to study in Trinity?
So first of all, thank you very much for having me. I think it's a great idea that you guys have and what you're trying to build. So, for me, Trinity, I guess it was the experience, right? Because I grew up in Dublin and I suppose I'd been more exposed to UCD while I was in school in terms of the sports pitches. My friends lived in that area. I just had a sense of it. And then when I first actually went into the Trinity campus and felt that buzz in front square with lots of people around, the old look and feel, I think that really played to the experience side. And then when I got down there, walked around the science block, looked at the subjects, and I would say as well, like from the subject matter, being someone not that clear on what I wanted to do, natural sciences gave me this broad sort of opportunity space to kind of dig in and see, was it going to be geography? Was it going to be chemistry? Was it going to be biology? Um, and I appreciated having the flexibility and time to figure out what I really did like by doing. So the experience of the campus, the flexibility of the course, and the atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So when you were in Trinity, what were your expectations of yourself? So where did you see yourself going in your career at that moment in time?
Mm. Yeah, so look, I would say consulting is something I discovered late on. I didn't really understand it, nor was I overtly aware of it early on in my time at college. I think the pharma industry probably is where my first interest lay. I was doing science. What does science look like when it's applied in a commercial context? Um, and I remember at the time as well, like would have been post Celtic Tiger crash type scenarios, and those headlines about the average salary of someone coming of a science graduate in comparison to others. And I was like, okay, I'll just do science and I'll figure stuff out. But as I got more and more into it, I think what really appealed to me was actually the impact detailed understanding of molecular science could have on people's health and well-being, and how drug development isn't just a serendipity, even though it has been historically, but there's actually a lot of rational drug design, drug discovery, and ultimately problem solving. If you look at a disease and look at someone's health, and you think of something that is, an acute problem that, if better understood, could be challenged. There's the feasibility, that what I learned through the years of doing science to make that feasible to engage with someone's health through understanding what's driving it, that made me super excited. So that's what drew me into science. That's what drew me into pharma. And then I remember finishing university and kind of thinking, like, I'm not entirely sure what my career path looks like. And then when the consulting firm started doing their presentations, that's when I was like, okay, problem solving, got it. That's what I want to do.
That's really interesting, actually. That kind of answers my next question as well, because we were wondering, like, was your core interest in science and its commercialization, or was it solely in the science side of things? But you managed to find that kind of fusion between, science and, business there.
Yeah, I would say it was science and people first.
Okay. Yeah.
And if not being too philosophical, but understanding the impact that science can have on people's day-to-day lives, like we're experiencing right now in this pandemic. How can exceptional science lead to, better quality of life for people. That was what was excited me most. Pharma perhaps being like a specter of, something maybe takes advantage of that was on my mind. And I remember even being approached once by a tobacco company, to work for them, and that intersection between science and business. And I was like, no, that doesn't quite fit. And so that's why, for me, like consulting and research was a great path to understand, especially on the agency side, rather on the company side. You're serving companies who drive this industry. Consulting was a great way for me to understand, how does it work? What do people do? What are the ethics? What are the values? What are the problems? And like which are the ones that I'm best suited to solving? To kind of, it essentially gives you a lot of time as well to kind of figure out what you really care about and what you want to focus on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's great. So then just on the science side of things, so many of our listeners would be passionate about scientific research. So across the 3 companies you've worked with, have there been any projects in particular that you really enjoyed, that really stood out to you as a scientist?
Good question. I mean, I could think of, let's see, a drug launch is probably one of them. Patient services is probably another. But no, I think drug launches probably stand out actually. So drug launches and R&D, they're the 2 I'm going to say. I'm going to land on them. So the first one, drug launches. This is the period where you move from clinical trials through to regulatory submission and approval of a drug. And for me, that is the intersection, right? That's where you move from research through to like, we're going to release this to the world and to people to try and benefit from it, assuming that they're going to benefit from it. And being part of that process over an 18-month period, going through all the details, watching the science evolve, watch our understanding of the mechanism, our understanding of how the drug works in people, and the effect it has on their survival, on their disease, on their quality of life, and just kind of understanding that and just kind of iterating how well we understand it over time, up to the point that we then say, this has been approved, we're going to launch it, and seeing people's reaction to that was thrilling. That was, if you think of these big congresses, being in the room when something you've worked on for 18 months gets presented and everyone just puts their phone up to take a picture because of what they've seen on the data. That was quite a striking experience. The second one, which was in R&D, so within a clinical trial space, actually working with a product in development and trying to use design technology to try and accelerate how we do that, and especially during COVID, thinking about how do we make trials keep working. Trials are a key part of the healthcare system and not just an industry platform. How do we make sure that these things can keep running when people can't get to hospital, or people are scared to go to hospital, or people are not going to their GPs? So using technology to solve that and kind of to enable science to continue was probably another highlight.
Yeah, sounds really like self-fulfilling and stuff. So then I just wanted to ask, so obviously you're a consultant who has a BA in natural sciences. So do you believe that you have any specific skills that perhaps, maybe traditional consulting, students might not have?
So I would ask the question what a traditional consulting student would be.
The air quotes. Yeah, I suppose.
I think that's,
yeah.
What would you define that as?
Yeah, I suppose we're here to try and break down, some beliefs that, you have to go a certain way in order to get to consulting. And I think that's something that might be quite prominent in, the business school. And as you were saying, there's such a fusion between engineering and biology. So to be honest, I feel like traditionally you'd say business, but obviously that's not the case.
No, traditionally, yeah, for sure. I think that is true, but I think the businesses of so many industries require expertise. For me, I looked at health sciences, but I say so many of my colleagues are, business graduates with engineering degrees, or physicians, or um, or even some art students, or designers. Actually, is another one I work a lot with. So people with industrial design backgrounds. And what's the common trait that a lot of them have? Is problem solving. Really being exceptional problem solvers is probably the most common trait that I've come across. And that kind of excitement of solving a problem too. I think that the team, being able to work in a team, is probably another piece as well. I think that's something that can be a bit of an adaptation. If you think of your academic careers, especially postgraduate academic careers, you're asked to do a lot of independent work and back up your own work and present your own thesis, and it's less of a group piece. So the more kind of being able to function really well, solve problems in a team, and then being able to communicate that in an effective way, that's what's really important. And if you think about really less about what do consulting companies need versus what do the companies that consulting companies serve need, that can often be an easier framing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So lastly, for our listeners who are perhaps more interested in science but still curious about business and getting involved in consulting, so what would your advice be for them?
So I would focus on what you enjoy the most. I think there's, and I fell into this trap for sure, where I was strong on one side, but was investing all my time in trying to balance what I thought I didn't have. Rather than saying, I have a great engineering background, I have a great science background, what are the problems that I'm going to be able to solve for a consulting company? I've been really good at that. I've been able to communicate that and articulate that, and the training will follow. Being able to understand context, being able to communicate clearly and succinctly. I think communication is probably the biggest thing I would say to focus on. Your written communication, your verbal communication. I've, through many interviews, I've seen people come in from a graduate program who have exceptional CVs and exceptional knowledge, but don't have the experience of how to articulate that and how to communicate themselves in a positive way. And I've also seen the opposite, where I've seen people come in and they're full of confidence and they present amazingly, but the actual facts and the knowledge aren't there. So getting that balance of is going to be really important for interviews, for submissions, and then for ultimately being in the job.
Yeah, I totally agree that when you're doing your degree, it's important to focus on the soft skills you gain from everything you do, as well as that sort of technical and qualification. They're both so important to balance. 100%.
And I'd also say they're your secret weapon as someone who went to an Irish university.
Yeah.
Or anyone who, if you take those soft skills you learn of being positive, having the crack, and apply that in a work setting that can be quite dry, especially abroad, it can be a real differentiator and help you stand out.
Yeah, and it's not something that you per se you're taught. It's something that you kind of pick up along the way through all the skills you gain through your modules and stuff. So yeah, I totally agree. That was the last question. Thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
That was really, really insightful. Just gonna
with good grades. And there's lots of people who've got into good schools, but there aren't as many people who are truly distinct in what they've done and how they approach things and how they solve problems and their ability to go above and beyond for an objective. I think so much of the hiring process, and you're thinking of putting people on teams, if you're on one of those kind of the higher end consulting teams, you could be just get a call on a Friday afternoon and sent off to a client site on a Monday morning, and you need to be able to plug into whoever is there on that team.
Mm.
You're going to have lots of different profiles, you're going to have lots of different skill sets, and being able to fit in is really important.